Now it's time to put our model into use, right? We want to be able to say whether something is a sports headline or a business headline. So we're going to make a quick app that makes use of this. But one thing that I would like to point out is that whenever we made our model last time, I forgot to capitalize the name of the model, and it definitely should be capitalized. So go ahead, wherever your model was, delete it. Mine was just on the desktop. I went ahead and deleted it. Open back up that playground, and here where you're creating the path about where it's going to, make sure that you have a capital H on headlines or whatever it is you decide to name your file. But go ahead and change that to a capital, run it one more time. You'll see now I have this headlines. The big reason for this is ultimately this turns into a class, and to have a lowercase in a class technically still works, but it's a little bit dirty. It doesn't feel right. Like that's not the standards in Swift, right? Like we're kind of going outside of that. So I thought that was a good change that we could make to our code. But it's time to go ahead and make the app that's going to put this model to the test so that we can, use it very quickly and allow other people to get into it. So let's go ahead and create a new Xcode project. We just want an iOS single view application. And let's just go ahead and call this one Sports or Business. You can go ahead and name it something a little more professional than that, but I think that's kind of a fun title there. With that in place, let's go ahead and hit next. We're going to throw this on the old desktop. Okay, now just like before, we're just simply going to bring into our model. So I'm going to open up Finder here and just take our headlines and kerplop. Bring that right in. Okay, hit finish. Then all of a sudden, look at this. We have this headlines here, and look, this is the information that we had. So there was no license. We said that, but I'm the author. This is the news article classification thing. Look, it takes in a string and it spits back out a string. It takes an input text and it gives back a label, all that good stuff. So with this in place, we're ready to go and move on to the next thing. And you can see, this looks like the data that we had. If we go ahead and open up the JSON here, let's do, I want to say open with Xcode specifically, but for some reason it's not allowing me to do that. I can just open this directly from Xcode. Here we go. We'll move on to my desktop. Right, there we go. So it's taking this information, whatever title we provide it, and it's giving back a particular category. It did change that to text and label, so it changed a little bit, but that's all right. With this information, we can actually get going here in the app quickly. But before we dive into the machine learning side of things, let's get the visual side of our app up and running. So let's move over to our storyboard. Okay, it's really simple here. We just want to have a text field and then a button and a label, right? Like someone should be able to type something into the text field, like a news article headline. So we'll go get a text field out here. I'm going to set up the spacing. So yeah, I'm going to do the constrained to margins thing. I'll maybe go like 50 and 50 on each side. That seems about right. Give it a nice big space there. Let's put a button just below that. So we'll add a button here. Now you could get a whole lot more fancy here. Let's do some vertical spacing. Like you could say, for example, just as someone is typing, automatically run the machine learning and stuff like that. But we'll have this button say predict. Now, predict is a little bit more of a machine learning term. I think if a kind of general user was going to be using this, predict is a little bit weird. Maybe we could have a better term like process. Totally up to you, but I'm just thinking sometimes as a developer you can get in the world of using terms that aren't really all that natural to people. I'm hoping that something like process is a little bit better than predict, but now I'm thinking that process is like that. So I guess we'll have to, here's what I'll do. Analyze. Maybe, no, I don't know. We'll stick with predict. Anyways, something to think about, ultimately for the user, what it should be. But last thing that we need to have is a label that's essentially going to tell us whether this is going to be sports or not. So I'm going to do control drag here. Let's do some nice vertical spacing on that. With this button and also the label, we got to make sure it's centered. So I'm going to go ahead and specify some centering there. Also with this guy, say that that's going to be centered. And I'll have this either say sports or business, but I'm going to beef this up a little bit. I want this to show up a little bit bigger. So I'm going to change this to a semi-bold, and I'm going to up the number there. Great. Now we've got to connect these things to our code. We need all three of these things. So I'm going to go and do a split screen here. Okay, so first let's bring over the outlets. The outlets are going to be the text field. Since we only have one, I'll just simply call it text field here. But you've got to spell it correctly. Okay, I'll go ahead and delete that. I've got to delete the connection on here as well. There we go. Let's try this one more time. Control drag. I'm going to call this text field. Excellent. Then we also want to bring over this label. We'll call this answer label, because this is, you know, the answer as to whether it's sports or business. And then we're going to simply just have an action down here for when someone hits predict. So we'll say this one should be an action. Good. And we'll call this predict tapped. Awesome. Okay, so we've got everything connected up there. That was not too bad at all. Now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and make use of this model. And so this is going to be a lot more straightforward than our previous one, and it's all core models, all core data models at the end of the day have inputs and outputs, and that's what we're going to be using here. If you're wondering why we didn't do that last time, we use the Vision framework because it handles a lot of working with images and just makes that easier to get around with. Whereas when we just have strings going in and out, we can actually get into a little bit more of the raw information there. So first thing that I'm going to do inside of my view did load is just when the app opens up the very first time, I want to take my answer label and set its text just to be equal to an empty string so that we don't have anything showing up there. But once someone hits the predict button, I'm realizing I misspelled predict there. So let's go ahead and predict. I mean, technically it would still work if I didn't change this, but I think it's a good practice to make sure you go back and fix your changes. So we'll do split screen here. I'm going to select this button and go to its connections, delete what we have there, and this time we're going to go backwards a little bit. I'm going to click drag this onto the button. And there we go, it's connected now with the proper spelling. But when someone hits this button, like I was saying, this is when we want to do all the magic of saying, okay, we got something, let's go ahead and run with it. So the first thing is we got to get the text that someone had entered, which is going to be inside of that text field. So I'm going to say if let text be equal to the text field dot text, and we just simply need to unwrap that. That's why I did that if let there. So now we have text, which is a string. The next thing that we need to do is we need to create a proper input for these headlines. So this is where we're finally going to be using our headline code. If you just start typing headlines, look, you can see we can go to headlines, headlines input, or output. So in this case, this is an input that we're trying to create here. So we're just going to say headlines input, and we're going to do dot init, and we want to go ahead and pass a string into here. So what's the string that we're going to pass in? That is going to be the text. So just go ahead and throw that in there. So this is going to be our input. So I'm going to say let input be equal to what we have here. Okay. Next thing that we need to do is specify what the output is going to be. And where do we get an output from? Well, we take our headlines and we make a new class object there. And then on that, we say dot prediction, and you can see that it can actually take in a headlines input and gives us back a headlines output. Yeah, I mean, when you kind of get down to the base level of core ML, Apple has made this incredibly simple for us. So awesome. So we're just simply going to put in our input there. Great. And like I said, this gives us an output. It gives us an output optional. So I'm going to say if let output be equal to this, do our nice little curly brackets there. You could see now our output that we have here. We should have, spell it correctly. There we go. Output is going to be of type. It's not showing the type. Let's do a build and let's see if everything's happy here. I forgot to do the try question mark. There we go. Now if we build this, should give us the output. Come on, we're waiting. There we go. Now if we look at output, it's a headlines output object. Now the question is, how do we get information out of this? Really, essentially what we've got to do is we've got to say dot feature value for string, and you're wondering what string do we put in there? Well, if we go back and look at our headlines here, this is what we're looking for. If we pass in label, it's going to give us back the string that we're looking for. Just so exactly whatever your output is, in this case it's label. We're going to say for lowercase label. What this should do is give us back the information that we need. And in fact, if you go ahead and do feature value, it will tell us exactly. It's an ML feature value. So we can say if let feature be equal to this output.feature value, then we can take this feature value that we have right here and do dot string value on that, and that's going to give us back, whether it's sports or whatnot. So in this case, for the time being, let's just go ahead and print this out so we can see what it is. Okay. With this, let's go ahead and I'm going to simulate this on the iPhone 8. Let's go ahead and run this. So big moment here. We're finally getting to test out what it is that we have. Okay, app opens up. I'm going to type something in here. I'm going to say something like basket. We're going to go really simple. I'm going to say basketball is a great game. I think it should have no issues with this. Let's hit the predict button and look at that. It says sports. Something covered it up in a second there, but it did say sports before, and it should be saying sports again, but for some reason we're not getting the proper output there. There we go. It said sports before. I'm not sure why it's not outputting that again. I think maybe the simulator is frozen up or something like that. Thank you, Xcode Beta. But you can see that that's there. Let's go ahead and try like a different headline in there. Let's looks like I'm gonna have to ultimately stop that and run it again because it had frozen up so much. But we should be able to see business if we do something a little bit more businessy. So let's say something like stocks prices are at an all-time high. Predict. Look at that, business. Okay, so it's not bad with the very limited information. You can imagine with this text stuff, especially if we were able to automate the headline organization, like we could have gotten a lot further with this. But it's pretty good at finding out this information. The thing is now that we want that display in our nice label there. So it's either going to say in all lowercase business or sports. So this is where I'm just going to do a little if statement. I'm going to say if feature.string value is equal to business, then we want to take our answer label and set its text to be equal to a capital business, and then the else of the situation, because if it's not business or sports, in our situation we only looked at two, we can just say this answer label.text is equal to a capital sports. All right. Moment of truth here. Let's go ahead and run this. We'll test it out real quickly, and then we'll actually go online, look at some current headlines, and see if it works out. So let's do this time. Tennis. That's not even how you spell tennis. Let's do, my spelling is horrendous. Let's do baseball is fun to watch. Predict. Oh, business. Let's see what happens if I put LeBron in there. I know that one of those articles about LeBron. That doesn't change at all. Let's see, baseball LeBron. Okay, that switched it back to sports. As you can see, it's not a perfect model. We didn't give it a ton of data. Let's go ahead and do a little bit of a real world test here. Let's go check out Google News. All right, I got my Google News up and running. So let's just go grab something from business. Go ahead and open this up, and oh, this is great. Papa John's founder quits as chairman after using the N-word. Really pleasant news cycle that we have here, but it's what we've got. Let's go ahead and test it out. So we're going to say Papa John's founder quit as chairman after using the N-word during conference call. Oh, Papa, where'd you go wrong? Okay, predict. Hey, it got it correct. Business. Okay, so this is looking, even with my misspelling there, it was able to get that correct. Let's try this in the sports arena. Let's go get our top one from sports. Croatia beats England in semifinal match. Will face France. All right. Croatia beats England in semifinal match. Let's go ahead and just leave it there. Semifinal match. Predict. It says sports. Okay, so this would be pretty cool to test out, like I said, with a better trained model. Also, I think it'd be really cool to actually have this connected with an API so that we could actually load in a bunch of sports or a bunch of headlines and actually try and manually decipher which thing is this, which thing is that, and get to a certain place. But anyways, hopefully you enjoyed learning about how to work with Core ML. Awesome things with Create ML in order to take our own different models and apply them into apps, as you saw here with each of these that we created. So if you have any questions, please leave it as a comment to this video, but let's go ahead and keep moving forward.